Hey Phoenix, it's Rebecca Michael. I'm back with another YouTube, and this topic is on the new supply. And I've got some notes here, so hopefully I'm not too rambly or jumbly about it. But the reason I want to get into this topic and the video after this one on how they recycle old supply, I'll do that in the next video, where I'll get into hoovering, etc. But in this one, I'm going to stick to new supply because this is always a major hard issue in the healing process for us targets to deal with your replacement. And there's a lot of research on it, so I'm coming from the research. And also my experience, although I'm not going to get into my personal experience in these videos just yet right now. I may later, at a later date or time. We'll see how this goes first, but this is just to present you the facts and also what I've seen in the forums and what I've seen. This is probably the biggest hurdle to get over is the new supply or the recycled old supply, which I'll do in the next video, the old supply. Now, new supply and old supply, I know that's hard to hear, but we have to understand from their point of view, that's what we are. We're supply. They're using us for some reason or some need, or it's all self-serving. So depends on whether you do the discard or they do. The new supply can vary according to that. And my experience, well, my current experience is with an aging narc. So I have that to bring to the table for anybody out there who's in that situation where you're coming out of a long-term relationship, marriage, whatever, with an aging narc, and what to expect in terms of new supply, for example, or them recycling old supply that they've trashed and discarded and now they're back. Anyway, okay, so on about the new supply here. It depends on whether you discarded them or they discarded you, okay? So in my case, I beat him to the discard. So they have the 4-stage cycle, as I've mentioned in another video, if you want to look that up, Kanban, love scams. So that's idealize, devalue, discard, and hoover or re-idealize or recycle is another word for that. And it just keeps going around and around that circle. If they have a use for you, again, they'll shelve you and they'll be back for you when they're low on supply or they have no supply. And as they're aging out, of course, what's on the shelf is getting, you know, at the drain, basically. We're talking about the drain by this time, but yeah, when they're younger, they have a lot more options than they do when they're older. So the new supply, yeah. So if you discard them, what they will do, because they don't have, they're parasitic, okay? So they don't have a replacement for you. So you'll be absolutely amazed at who this person even is. This is not the person they represented them to be. And I have another video on their fake personas and masks if you want to check that out. But anyway, they go for panic pics. They call it panic pics in the research. And so that's basically emergency supply. So the panic pics are in the form of pickups from friend zoned, whatever, or bars, prostitutes, the streets. These are known as transitory rebound type of transactions in the research for narc supply of some kind. And it's for false validation. And I say false validation because they're lying and gaslighting who they're talking to or trying to get supply from in order to get that validation. So it's false. They're having to trick and lie their way into getting this validation. And usually it involves bashing their ex or bashing the last target or whatever. The reason why this is happening is they've had a massive narc injury. If you've beat them to the discard, if you've had enough of their crap and booted them, so it's a massive narc injury. They have no narc supply in place. In other words, they didn't have a secondary source, side piece, or whatever to replace you with, or secured, or, they're just left there with no supply. And they're parasitic, so they need another host. So they're having a desperate scramble now for emergency narc supply, and this will be their immediate reaction because they're desperate. They're desperate for supply. Once the primary supply has booted them, or even the secondary, temporary, transitory, rebound one, yeah, it's a scramble for supply, and they'll go to panic picks. Or low-hanging fruit, as they call it. So, as some time goes by, they will finally get to friend zoning people, and according to that, the target, whoever they're targeting, they're gonna, well, if they're aging, they're gonna have to be friend zoned. They're gonna be have to be friend zoned as long as that new supply is insisting on it, right? If they can snag anybody at all, by this time I'm talking about when they're aging especially. So they finally get to a short-term rebound type of transaction, which they quickly devalue and discard. And the reason for this is because they're all about conquest. So they're using this person like they use everyone else, and including family, friends. There isn't anybody they don't use as tools for their schemes, or to get what they want or need, or it's temporary, and then you're just devalued and discarded. So the rebound type is a short term, and they'll say anything to ensnare and trap this one. So the reason why is they don't bond. They're parasitic. That's their calling card. So they attach. They don't bond like a parasite. And you're now the new host if you're the new supply. And we've all been the new supply. So we've often been in several of these stages with them that I'm talking about here. As the relationship progresses and they keep recycling you, for example. So this is how they are able to engage with you and disengage with you so quickly to the devalue and discard stages of the relationship. So yes, like I said, they use all people for a purpose, and then they discard when not useful to them anymore, or you're an obstacle because now they've got their sights set on a new supply, because they're sourcing new supply the entire time they're with any supply at all. They're sourcing new supply the whole time they're with you, is what I'm saying. No matter what they're telling you, because whatever they're telling you, you're the dream woman, you're my God, you've known each other in other lives, or you're the love of my life. They say the same thing to anybody that they're targeting. They don't mean it. They don't mean any of it. Obviously, watch their behavior. So they use all people for a purpose, and then they discard when not useful, or an obstacle. And if you become an obstacle, in other words, if you become one of those targets that is now an exposure threat to them, you become public enemy number one. And that's a good thing to be, actually. It's a good thing to be the bad ex in this case. Not the good one. The good one is the one that can still be manipulated in their mind, whether or not that's even true. But in their mind, the good axe is the one that's on the shelf to be recycled if they have a use for them again. So yeah, no, you want to be the bad, evil axe, okay? You want to be the badass here. You know, just do so safely, and you're going to be public enemy number one. And wear it like a badge of honor regarding them, okay? So that's if you're an exposure threat. And they will be starting to smear campaign you, by the way. They're usually way ahead of you on that one. They planted seeds all along. So they will also recycle family, friends, etc. Those are all known in the literature as old supply. Now, once again, this is not our view of people. This is their view. And in order to heal, you really need to understand how they think. They don't think like us, Phoenix. But more on that in the next video on the recycling business. The point here is if you beat them to the discard, they will be doing a desperate scramble for narc supply. And what that will be while you are traumatized and going through the various normal mourning stages of losing an important relationship to you. They don't go through that. They don't grieve. This is because they have no emotional empathy. They have the ability to cold read, but not emotional empathy, and a very severely impaired conscience, if any at all. So they do not grieve. They don't have the emotional range. They're arrested. They're arrested development in childhood somewhere back there. So it's like dealing with a 7-year-old. And that's an insult to 7-year-olds everywhere. You know what I mean, though. A 7-year-old, a demented one in an adult body that refused to grow up and do the work. That's what I mean. So instead of grieving, they have what's called a narc injury, and they go into rage at the target. If you boot them, okay, or if you fight back, stand up for yourself. And a desperate scramble for new or recycled supply starts immediately. And no low is too low for them in terms of their panic picks. They'll switch up genders. They'll get into all kinds of weird... I mean, you will find yourself utterly amazed if you're privy to this information that they're doing. And you'll realize that you never really knew this person, because they morph into whatever they can scramble up from the thirsty loaf, hanging fruit on the streets, in the bars, etc. Nothing they represented to you. And so all of this will be while you are conversely in normal mourning stages, especially if in a long-term relationship. And then you see this, and this alone will cause cognitive dissonance, is what it's called, in you, and that causes trauma, because who you thought you were with and what you thought what was going on, and what you find out at the discard and their scramble for supply while you're in mourning. And the smear campaign that they've launched on you, this is all devastating. This is all going on while you're in the normal mourning stage of a relationship, but they're not normal. They don't think like us. They're emotional predators and parasites, so they're scrambling for supply. And this is also how narcs trauma bond you. It's called a betrayal bond or Stockholm syndrome. You might want to Google those two terms. Or trauma bond. Google trauma bond. You'll understand Even when you find this out, you're devastated. And the reason why is because you are now trauma bonded. And understanding that will help you heal. Because at this point, it's not love. You don't love who they are. Who you find out they are, you don't love that. You love who you thought they were. And that was real. So you're going through real grieving for that person you thought you were with. But you weren't. That was all lies. It was all founded on lies, gaslighting, schemes, whatever. So yeah, they want to cause you as much damage as possible to potentially shelve and later hoover you or recycle you if all this fails. So if all this scrambling around for the new supply or recycled supply fails, you're shelved in their minds, frozen in time, possibly even for years or decades, and they will be back for you when they have low or no supply, especially as they're aging out. So more about this recycling and trauma bond I'll set up in the next video. But the reason for the trauma bond is that the damages they cause, they know they're going to cause. Okay, this is intentional. Then they can come back once they've shelved you, if they have a use for you again, because they have low to no supply. They'll come back ministering to your wounds that they intentionally inflicted. That is why they create the trauma bond. They've done this many times. They know what they're doing. Okay, this is going to sound a bit rude. We've all been the new supply. But if it depends on your awareness and your age as well. We can all make stupid mistakes when we're young. But as we're getting older here, we're more responsible for having some wits about us. We have life experience, etc. So I'm talking about an aging narc in my case. So this might sound a bit nasty, but I don't mean it like that. But it's the truth. It's way time to grow up by the time you're hitting your 50s and 60s here. Anyway, the new supply is often an unwitting dupe of the narc. That's quite often true. However, as they age out, the new supply, as they're aging out, there is definite major desperation going on with them to be getting with a narc that has a track record history that's easily verified. And they ignore that and continue on. Now, who's doing that unless they're desperate? Okay, and at risk of being at some kind of drain themselves, where's the integrity of that? No, where's the truth? What are you doing with the truth? So, I mean, who else with any sense that comes with a lot of life experience go for that past all the red flags and leaking mask of the narc? And in my situation, I've got a page up that fills in all the holes that are easily verified with facts, evidence, and witnesses. It's not hard to look into and realize the truth. And send it packing. Not go ahead with it, but, suit yourself because you're going to be the next victim. Anyway, so these new supply that I'm talking about here, these obviously desperate, thirsty ones who disregard plain in your face truth, okay, aging out, they're buying into all the flattery from someone who doesn't know them or know them well. In other words, the narc. And they're usually envious as well at the abused target, and they're abusing by proxy themselves. By helping this narc, enabling this narc to be a further abuse to the actual partner, who they are replacing, and so they're competing for the narc with the abused target. Now, at 50, 60 years old, I get it. If maybe you're in your early 20s and you've never heard of this and you don't have I get that, okay? I just don't get it as you're aging out. Why are you going to compete, Phoenix? I'm talking to you. Why are you going to compete with two low-functioning fools at the drain? And I'm talking about the new supply as well as the narc. So, you know, your attitude needs to grow up into have at it. Have at it. Yeah, you're next. So, all the new supply is getting is trash. Narc, trash, and if you booted them, you're trash. Or for the recycled supply, for that matter. Especially if you booted them. But even if not, narcs are trashy bottom feeders as they age out. It's all that's left to them. And it's bad karma for both the new supply, or the recycled supply, and the narc. Yeah, it rapidly fails, it'll rapidly fail. Because it's founded on lies and gaslighting. Just foolishness. Now, so these are, yeah, it's going to go sideways fast. These are two desperate, thirsty, dysfunctional people at the drain is all that's about. One of them is an active abuser, the narc, who is the partner, the ex-partner, and the other one is the low-hanging fruit at the drain that they, aging out, that they managed to scrabble up to go along with abuse by proxy. They don't check into anything. Or if they do, they don't believe it. They think they know better. Well, if you know better, what are you doing? So try and see the humor in it. And if you can, have some pity on them both. It's a train wreck with a narc at any age, but especially as they age out. And for whoever is going along for the roller coaster ride, narcs are chronic infidels. They're chronic infidels. Chronic infidels, okay? That's what they're getting. So good riddance. Do the happy dance that they're out. And this is now the new supply or the recycled supplies problem. You dodged a bullet. Many do not get out sane or alive. So this is no joke. Thank God for the deliverance and for the narc supplies or the old supply, the new supply. Thank God for the new supply distracting that narc off of you, at least temporarily, so that you can heal and get out. Completely get out from the inside out. Take your freedom, Phoenix. Learn the lesson. Run and never look back. So once some time passes, and they're out there for a while and grooming others past the short-term rebounds. Now we've gone from panic pics to short-term rebounds that they've actually managed to scrabble up through friend zones or God knows where. And now they're getting to graduate to longer-term, short-term rebounds. These come from those they have collected, interviewed, and assessed as potential replacements for you. Now remember, this is all while you're going through devastation, emotional devastation. So Yeah, this is what they're doing. They're scrambling for supply. This is what you were with. You were with a parasite that's looking for another host. You know, you did not have a spouse. You did not have a long-term partner here that you thought you had. That's the shock of it. That's the cognitive dissonance of it. That's the trauma of it. When you find out what they are under the mask, and you find out at the discard. Their behavior post-discard is extremely abusive. Abusive with the smear campaigns and everything. They're unbelievable. They have zero integrity. So these, like rebounds, come from the friend zone often, like I said, especially as they age out, because they can't easily obtain narc supply, new supply, which they prefer over old supply. So we all start as new supply, and once the conquest is over, once it goes romantic, 3 to 6 months max, you are now old supply. You're no longer new supply after about 3 months. That's when the devalue is going to start kicking in if it hasn't already. So we've all been the new supply at some point. So just remember back when you were, and you will know what they're doing. They are grooming and mirroring this new supply. You wouldn't even recognize this person at this point that you thought was a spouse or whatever. You're like, who's that? Who the hell is that? Right? So they'll be mirroring this new supply. And the irony of it, this is how twisted it gets. This new supply may actually be falling for you, because the narc will be mirroring some of your virtues and plagiarizing you and blah blah blah, you know, in order to snag it. He'll put on, or she will put on some of your traits, because they'll know, oh yeah, they've got files of all of these ways of putting together a customized mask for you. And that can come from their targets from the past, or movies, or song lyrics, or, you know, I mean, they're just twisted. Anyway, they're all about conquest. So usually that's the initial stages of a trauma bond. Once that happens, the devalue is going to start. So yeah, truth is clear. It's consistent across the board with evidence. Confusion usually indicates the presence of deceit and manipulation. So there's holes in their story and things aren't adding up. This is all leading to confusion. And what they told you in the beginning, that's not what they're doing later, right? And so they seek to keep you confused and second-guessing them. And if you're paying attention to your gut, you'll sense it. So start investigating further on your own. Look where they don't want you to look, and stop listening to what they're showing you or telling you. Their words are smoke and mirrors. The truth about them is what they're hiding and their sleight of hand. So look where they don't want you looking. No, never mind where they're showing you to look or what, you know, telling you. If you're in doubt, okay, start investigating, start vetting. They know if you knew the low life they really are, and they know they are. They're full of toxic shame. Because of what they've done in the past, okay, and their track record for real, if you knew all that, you'd run fast and far away. And they need supply for external validation, and they don't have a true strong core identity developed. Like I said, they don't do the work. They are parasitic, and they ride off the coattails of others' merits, virtues, and work instead of doing the work of individuation themselves. So once the devaluation stage starts after the idealization, there is no going back to idealization. as that was all founded on lies and manipulation in the first place. Discard and possible recycling later down the road. You'll be shelved if you're of any use. Will be next. And you can be sure as they're aging out, you will be of use. If you're going to be on that shelf. So, I know this is getting a bit long. Sorry about that, Phoenix. There's a lot to cover here. As they age out, narcs use both short-term relationships and long-term relationships as either rebounds or recycles, because the new supply dries up for them as they age out. They're just not capable of drumming it up. They run for the hills. Normal people run for the hills with these people, especially as you're aging, like I said. You know, you'll see them coming. Now, if that's not the case for you, you need to get knowledge here and you need to walk in it. You need to apply it. You need to stop thinking about what you want to hear and get in line with truth and reality, hard reality, okay? Because that's what's going to set you free. You never want to be going through this again, you know, especially as we're aging here. So this is, this is known as old supply in the research on it. The recycling. So the new supply, once conquered, okay, once the conquest of the new supply and the manipulative shift starts into deval from idealization, it's called the manipulative shift. The new supply is now the old supply. For possible later breadcrumbing and random love dosing to re-ensnare that target possibly later for future supply. Especially as they're aging out. They're getting desperate now. But once they do recycle you, it gets worse every time you take them back. The abuse. The devaluation. So it soon reverts back to devalue and discard. And the abuse cycle repeats. You'll spend most of your time in the devaluation stage, and they will punctuate that with the odd love dosing to keep you there, to keep you ensnared, especially as they're aging out, because they can't get anything else. Anybody with any sense by now is off the shelf. They've jumped off the shelf. They're not frozen in time here, waiting to be recycled. Especially by an aging, gross narc. So, yeah, because they don't do the self-care adulting. I mean, they just let it all go. They don't care about themselves either, really. I mean, they do, in a self-serving way, use other people. But they don't even, you know, the self-care adult, really. So when they're in a relationship, they know they have to do the bare minimum to try and secure a target. But no, once they get in the relationship, it's a slobby sloth, period. That's all you're going to get. So once in a long-term relationship, and as they age out, now we're talking about them getting into long-term relationships. You'll spend most of your time in the devaluation stage, which involves withholding affection, attention, neglect, negligence, silent treatments, dismissiveness, hot-cold treatments, push-pull treatments, power struggles, infidelity also throughout. And that will either be in their secret thought life, especially if they're aging out and they can't act this out. They'll be fantasizing, oh, God knows what, while they're sitting with you or while they're with you. Or, if possible, acting it out. And whatever we think on, we're going to act out if that's possible. And so that's what they're doing. They're infidels from the inside out. Secret. It's all a secret. Okay, it's different if there's two consenting adults here, but yeah, there shouldn't be these kinds of secrets in a close relationship, an intimate relationship. This is just betrayal. That's all it is. And the whole time they're with you in the long-term relationship, they will be sourcing out new supply. The reason why they prefer new supply, like I said before, it's all about conquest. So this to them is power and dominance. They've already had you. They've already bagged you, got you pregnant, got you married. You're marked for life in their minds. You know? And if they don't have a use for you, well, you're just trashed. You're just thrown away in the trash. Or maybe you're scrabbled back out of there if, you know, they're aging out. They don't have anything else going on. So the abuse slowly intensifies in a long-term relationship over time, like a frog boiling in a pot. While they're gaslighting, anytime you try to resolve anything, if something wrong, what's, you know, or they're breadcrumbing you or love dosing you throughout, punctuated here and there to keep you their supply. Especially as they're aging out, because they know. Are you kidding me? On the market out there, especially the craziness out there, no, they're not going to be able to get anything like good primary supply as they're aging out. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Who's putting up with it? Anybody putting up with that has no standards in themselves, no self-respect. So they're not going to be able to keep anybody worth their salt here, you know. They're going to end up with what's at the drain. So like I said, they parasite off others. And this is a defining trait of them. Sometimes the new supply has been there throughout the relationship. And once groomed and secured, they will discard you for this new supply affair they were having. And to do this, they will instigate fights. They will leave trophies around of their infidelity for you to find, or excuses in order to go out with to go out and secure or groom the new supply. So they'll set up arguments or whatever in order to go there with the new supply, or break up with you, or have you break up with them so they don't look like the bad guy. So if possible, they monkey branch like this from one relationship to another, and no low is too low for them. So it may be some connection through you or work or whatever. So your sister, your friend, your daughter, nothing's too low for them to go for supply to replace you. We're talking low lives here. That's what I mean. Okay, so yeah, if that's the case, the new supply has low to no boundaries. If they know about you, they have low to no boundaries. And usually it's an enabler, buying into their false victim stories and flattery. But sometimes it's another narc or a cluster B, borderline, sociopath, etc. Basically another abuser. Sometimes they're gullible. They end up with somebody as bad, if not worse, getting played worse than they are. Yeah. So if you're a people pleaser, you're a prime target. You're going to be a narc magnet if you're an empath. So you know what? You need to learn boundaries. And for that, you need to stay bullseye in the truth here. The red pill truth, whether you like it or not. Never mind what you prefer. That's not what's going on. So, you know, they don't really have a type. Narcs don't really have a type. So, I mean, a type. So, except they prefer empaths because they're coming with the false victim stories and trashing their last ex or target, or maybe several of them, and maybe one of them that they think is still an enabler on the shelf there. That'll be the good one. you know. You'll be the evil badass. Good for you. Good for you, Phoenix. Yeah, you're starting to fight. You're starting to fight back. Yeah, lamb to lion, baby. So yeah, they don't really have a type. But like I said, they like to target empaths because those are the generous, good-hearted people. And they're takers. So as they age out, this becomes much harder to find empaths. As most of them, as they age out, are low to moderate functioning. Because they've been taking the path of least resistance and effort and parasiting off others throughout their lives, and often at some kind, the result is they're often at some kind of drain as a result, whether it's a rich or a poor drain, okay? Nobody's going to want that that's got any sense. They're going to run for the hills. Let that be you. So, and me. So yeah, the older they get, the more obvious the red flags, and the lower the functioning of the new supply or the old supply, because that's all that's left available to them for long. Because anybody else, they're going to be quickly out of there, okay? Yeah, the incongruency alone, the bizarreness of their presentation, there's just so many red flags, it's, as they age out especially. Yeah, so the new supply are at the drain themselves, if not, believe me, they deserve each other. So yeah, water seeks its own level, you ever heard of that saying? And this is eventually true for failed narcs and the new supply or the old supply as they age out. Okay, yeah, we end up with our own kind eventually, or at least on our own. That's far better than ending up one of these lowlifes. Are you kidding me? Oh my God, I don't think I could stand what I was putting up with before for 5 minutes. I can't believe I was in it for years and years. So they can't keep the mask on for long. The narcs, it slips. And so they become quite transparent as lowlifes and users and abusers. They have a lot of estrangements as well, and they'll lie about all that. Yeah. Their smear campaigns are largely confessions, okay? So pay attention to what they're saying when they're smearing their exes, or they're smearing, or they're glorifying, or, you know, just pay attention, right? Because they don't glorify anything that's going to expose them or put serious boundaries on them. Not for long. Not when they find out, oh, there's no way back in here. It's not on the shelf. Anyway, who's going to settle for that? You know, with a grain of salt, worth a grain of salt, aging out ourselves here. You know, we've got some life experience and hopefully some wisdom and discernment by now. So low-hanging fruit of the drain is what's going to be, you know, settling for that. And they find each other, sometimes, or sometimes not. They repel each other sometimes. And furthermore, they deserve each other. Yeah, they deserve to be abusing each other. Just get the hell out. Yeah, there's not a lick of sense between the two of them. So don't worry about the new supply, Phoenix. I know this has been a bit long, longer than my other videos, but I really wanted to get through this because this really hurts people, this new supply being replaced by the... What the hell kind of mentality is that anyway? It's disgusting. You're not replaceable. Susie. Okay, so that's my dog, Susie. Past the conquest, don't worry about the new supply, because past the conquest, they become the old supply, and they're next, you know. Just thank God that it's not you anymore, and that this person is now it's their problem. Okay, this narc is now their problem. and they are they're a distraction off of you so that you can heal and get away, you know, completely get away, so you no longer care, because you got a lot of trauma, you got a normal grieving process to go through here, right? And it can take half the time you've been in the relationship to get over it. So if you've been in the relationship for, like, you know, 20 years, it can take 10 years to get over that horrific level of abuse and trauma bonding. Okay, so the new supply or the recycled supply, they're giving you a chance to, they're giving you a break, because while he thinks you're on the shelf, you're healing and you're getting away, right, for good, permanently. There's not going to be any recycling because you're not going to be there. You know, when he goes to look on the narc harem shelf up there, you're not on there. And as he's aging out, he's lucky if anything from the drain's on there, you know. Okay. So on it goes, around and around that abuse cycle on repeat, Phoenix. That's all. And if this is you, you need to get out and stay out, or be abused and devalued into your advancing years when you're the most vulnerable. No, thank you. Seek the truth. The evidence is there to find. It may be hard, but it will be free. It will free you from a chronic abuser and stop you from becoming yet another used and abused casualty. And if you look into it, they have many. So that's all I have to say, Phoenix, and that was a lot. I don't know if you're still around, but if so, you take care. I'll be back with a video on recycling old supply, which is another one of their tricks. That's what they do, when, especially if you split with them, you booted them, you beat them to the discard. Yeah, one of the first places they'll go is to recycle trashed family, trashed exes. See what's on the narc harem shelf, right? That's what they'll do. Okay, because they're in a desperate scramble for narc supply once you boot them. Because they're parasites. They don't bond. They attach. Okay? You haven't lost anything. I'll take care of yourself. And I'll be back soon with that other video. Ciao for now.